In financial accounting and controlling, we discuss about vendor master, company code tab. Under the company code data, the first one is account management. In vendor account management, the step number 1, reconciliation account. So what is meant by reconciliation account? A reconciliation account is a general ledger account that automatically records all transactions from vendor subledgers. Whenever you post a vendor invoice in MIRO, or post a vendor payment in F-53 or F110 by using automatic payment program, or post credit memos, SAP automatically updates the linked reconciliation GL accounts in real time. Where is it maintained? You assign the reconciliation account in the vendor master. So the menu path, go to vendor master, company code data tab. Under the company code data tab, account management tab. Under the account management, you can see the reconciliation field account. So example, if your vendor is, let's say, V1001, you may assign 160000 vendor reconciliation account. Now all postings to vendor V1001 will be updated in 160000. Purpose of reconciliation account: connects the subledger to the general ledger, ensures automatic financial accounting updates, prevents direct postings to control accounts, helps in accurate balance sheet reporting. These are all the purpose of reconciliation account. Why you cannot post directly to reconciliation accounts? Manual posting to avoid corrupting vendor balance. Only vendor transaction can hit that GL. The next field in the vendor account management, head office. What is head office in SAP Vendor Master? In SAP, the head office function is used when a company has multiple branch vendors, one central head office vendor. All accounting for the branches will be posted to and cleared through the head office vendor. Purpose of head office function: it helps companies manage centralized payments, consolidated statements, group level vendor balances. Example, vendor V1001 Chennai branch, vendor V1002 Mumbai branch, vendor 1000 is a head office. So both branch vendor can be assigned to head office. Now all invoices of 1001 1002 post to 100 account. Payment is made only to 1000 account. Vendor line item are shown under head office vendor. Where to maintain the head office? In vendor master, go to company code data tab. Under the company code data correspondence tab, you will find the field head office. Enter the vendor number of the head office. So the important notes: branch vendors cannot be reconciliation accounts. Branch vendors only reference the head office vendor. Head office vendor must have its own reconciliation account because all postings will hit that vendor. Branch vendor postings appear under head office. In FPL1N, you will see items grouped. So the next field, short key. What is meant by short key? So short key controls what informations will automatically appear in the assignment field of vendor accounting. It helps in easy line item sorting, faster clearing of open items, simplified payment reconciliation. Where is short key maintained? In vendor master company code data tab. Under the account management, you can see the short key. So purpose of short key: when a vendor invoice or payment is posted, SAP will automatically fill the assignment field based on the short key. This helps to group and sort line items in FBL1N and F-44, etc. Common short keys and their meanings. 001 posting date. So you can see the example how the field look like. 002 document number, 003 vendor invoice number, 012 customer vendor is reference number 022 baseline date. These are all the examples. Most commonly used in vendor master, short key 001 assignment vendor invoice number. This is a preference option because make reconciliation easy, help in matching PO and invoice, useful in payment reference. So the next field is subsidy indicator. What is the subsidy indicator in SAP? The subsidy indicator is used in SAP to identify whether a vendor receives subsidies or grants from a government or other authority. It is mainly used for statutory reporting and tax related requirements in certain countries. So where is it found? You will see the subsidy indicator field in vendor master company code data tab in vendor account management. Purpose of the subsidy indicator, it is used to track vendor who receives or provide subsidies, support government reporting formats, help in tax deduction or special accounting rules, control how transaction should be reported in legal reports. Example, a government aided supplier may receive a certain subsidy for supplies. If you set a subsidy supply is 1, SAP will mark transaction for the vendor as subsidy related, include it in specific statutory report, especially it is country specific. So the important notes, subsidy indicator is country specific, mostly used in Eastern Europe and Latin America. In India, localization it is rarely used unless your organization has special government reporting needs. It does not affect accounting directly, it is for reporting and classification. The next field is authorization group. So where is authorization group is maintained? Under the company code data, under the account management, you can see the authorization group. So the purpose of authorization group is used restrict vendor master access, control which users can work with certain vendors, protect sensitive vendors, directors, government vendors, critical suppliers, intercompany code vendors. These are all the examples. How it works, simple explanations. You assign an authorization group, example A001 to a vendor. You assign the same authorization group value to a role authorization object. So authorization object is F-LFA1_BEK. So the field is BEGRU, authorization group field technical name. Only users with this authorizations can open or modify that vendor. Example scenario, your company has a vendor used for direct payments or intercompany code transactions. You won't want to every user to see or edit this vendor. So vendor 2001 authorization group is A001. Only finance managers have the access to A001. Other users get an error. You are not authorized to display the particular vendor. You can see this kind of errors. So the next field is planning group. What is planning group in SAP Vendor Master? Planning group is used in cash management and liquidity planning to classify vendors into groups for cash flow analysis, liquidity forecast, payment behavior tracking, bank position planning. It helps the treasury or cash management team understand when cash flows are expected for different types of vendors. So purpose of planning group is used to categorize vendor based on how their payments should appear in cash management reporting. So we can use FF7A for cash position, FF7B for liquidity forecast, FF7C for cash flow total records. Different planning groups lets SAP classify expected liabilities more accurately. Now when invoices are posted, SAP reads vendor's planning group, place the cash flow into the correct liquidity bucket. So the configuration information is go to SPRO, treasury, cash management, planning, define planning groups. So the next field is, before going to next field, you can see the planning group examples. 001 regular suppliers, normal payment cycle. 002 critical suppliers, payment need priority. 003 intercompany code vendors, internal group transfers. 004 government vendors, statutory payments. Like this you can define the planning group based on your client requirement. The next field is release group. What is release group in SAP? Release group is used to in SAP release strategy. It's a kind of approval workflow for purchase requisitions and purchase orders and a request for quotations and contracts. It is a classification object that groups together release codes and release strategies. So SAP knows which approvers belong to which approval chain, which document type is controlled by which release setup. The purpose of release groups helps SAP separate and organize different approval process such as raw material PR approvals, capital purchase approvals, service PO approvals, import PO approvals. Each can have different approval hierarchy. So where is release group used? In purchase requisitions under the release strategy, header items like CE KKO, item level, CBON, CE BAN. In purchase order level, CE KKO, header level. So release group is a key field in configuring these. Example, let us say you want to approval process release group R1 used for raw material purchase requisitions. The approval flow look like this. First the store manager will approve and the manager is going to approve, and finally the general manager is going to approve. So release group R2 used for capital purchase orders. Approval flow like this: manager, finance and MD, managing director, the final approval. Because these are in different release groups, the approval chain and conditions stay separate. Okay, so I'm just giving example R1 R2, two different release group with two different chain of approval process. So related elements in release strategy: a release group work along with release codes, release indicators, release strategy, release prerequisites and classification of characteristics. So the next field is minority indicator. What is meant by minority indicator in SAP? The minority indicator is used to identify vendors who belong to recognized minority categories for government or statutory reporting. It is mainly used in countries where companies must report minority owned suppliers, special procurement categories, social responsibility complaints, government mandatory diversity reporting. This field does not affect accounting or purchasing, but it is used for classification and only reporting purpose. So purpose of minority indicator: it helps organizations track procurement from minority vendors, comply with the government diversity requirements, generate special reports for audits, claim benefits or credits for minority based purchase, supply chain transparency. These are all the purpose of using minority indicator. Example, suppose your company buys from a vendor who is certified as a SC or ST vendor, human owned business, small disadvantages business, minority owned SME. SME is nothing but small medium enterprise. You assign a code in the minority indicator field such as 01 SCST supplier, 02 human entrepreneur, 03 minority owned, like this. Then the SAP can include these vendor in spend analysis, diversity procurement reports and government compliance reports. The important notes when you are using the minority indicator: it is country specific, widely used in US, Canada and some other regions, has no impact on posting or payments, used mostly for reporting, not configuration. In some organizations, codes are audited annually. So the next field under the account management: certification date. So what is meant by certification date in our SAP vendor master? Certification date is the date on which the vendor was officially certified for a specific status, usually related to minority status, subsidy eligibility, quality inspection, quality certification, government approved vendor programs, diversity supplier certifications. It is used mainly for statutory complaints and reporting, not for accounting or purchasing. So purpose of certification date: the certification date helps companies track when a vendor's minority or statutory certification begin, when the certification is activated or expired, compliance with the government or audit requirements, eligibility for diversity or subsidiary reporting. So these are all the purpose of certification date. For example, a vendor is certified as a minority owned business on April 1, 2024. You enter this as a certification date. SAP can then includes this vendor in diversity spend for periods after the certification, exclude them before the date, show validity in audit reports. So the important notes when you are using the certification date is informational only, no posting impact, often used in public sector and large corporate procurement, works with reporting tools like SAP BW, SAP Ariba, diversity reports or customer reports. So the next field is interest indicator. So what is mean by interest indicator in our SAP Vendor Master? The interest indicator is used to determine how interest should be calculated on overdue vendor items. If your company wants to charge or pay interest on delayed payments, the interest indicator tells SAP whether the vendor is interest relevant, which interest calculations rules apply, what rate or formula is used. So it is part of the interest calculation configuration in accounts payable. Purpose of the interest calculator, it controls if overdue vendor invoices should be included in interest calculation, which interest calculation type to use, which rates or terms apply during this interest run. So example, let's say interest indicator V1 12% yearly. So the grace period is 10 days. So the calculation method is simple interest. So the interest indicator V2 15% yearly, 0 grace period, compound interest. So if vendor invoices cross due date, SAP use this interest indicator to calculate interest in FINT report. So the important notes, if no interest indicator is maintained in vendor master, is not interested relevant. Mostly used in Europe and public sector, very rarely used in India unless required by contract. It does not affect payments automatically. Interest is calculated only when you run interest calculations. So the next field is interest cycle. So what is meant by interest cycle in our SAP system, especially in vendor master? Interest cycle determines how often interest is calculated for a vendor during the interest calculation run, FINT. It tells SAP whether interest should be calculated monthly, quarterly, yearly or for every run, how the interest periods are divided, how postings should be grouped. It works together with the interest indicator. The purpose of interest cycle, the interest cycle defines the number 1 frequency of interest calculation, number 2 how SAP groups overdue items into interest periods, number 3 whether interest should be accumulated or calculated fresh in each period. So these are all the purpose of interest cycle. So the common interest cycle values, let's say 01 monthly interest cycle, 03 quarterly interest, 12 yearly interest, so 00 so no cycle, simple run. Okay, so you can use the values, depends on your client requirement configurations. For example, vendor ABC's interest relevant interest indicator is V1, which you set. So interest cycle is 01, meaning every due invoice will be included in a monthly interest period. If invoice is overdue from April, SAP calculates interest for entire April period. Next calculation happens in the May cycle, not daily, it is only monthly basics. If the interest cycle is 00, SAP calculates interest every time you run FINT reports without grouping by months or quarters. So whenever you are going to run it, then system will calculate the interest. Okay, so the technical link is interest cycle works with interest indicator, interest calculation types, interest rules, interest period settings. So this helps accounts payable avoid daily manual interest tracking. The next field is last key date. So what is meant by last key date? The last key date is used in interest calculation to store the last date on which interest was calculated for the specific vendor. This state is automatically updated by SAP when you run an interest calculation, run FINT. It helps SAP avoid double calculation interest, calculating interest for the same period again. So generally this last key date is used for ensuring there is no double check, there is no same period used once again. The purpose is up to which date interest has already been calculated, from which date the next interest calculation should start. This prevents duplication interest postings. So the important note is you should not manually change this field unless correcting data. If it is blank, no interest calculation has been done for this vendor. Usually mainly in countries where interest runs are regular, like Europe, public sector, long-term AP contracts, accounts payable contracts. The next one is last interest run. So in SAP stores the details of the most recent interest calculation run. So this is for customers, vendors, interest, dunning interest, etc. So you can review when interest was last calculated. So where to check the last interest run? So in transaction FINT, FINT AP, FINT AR. So especially for accounts payable and accounts receivable, if you are working with interest calculation, go to T code FINT, enter your company code, business partner and customer or vendor. So enter the key date, then click on the environment, interest run list. You will see the last run date, run identification ID, items included, interest, amounts, all the information you can see. So this is one option. Another option is in transaction F110 for payment program interest. If you want to know interest calculation during the automatic payment run, go to F11.0, enter run rate and identification, go to menu, environment, payment log. Here you can see whether interest posting happened in the payment run. So third one is table level. You can also view the last interest run in SAP tables. So these are all the tables you need to use to know the data. So the next field is withholding tax code. So what is meant by withholding tax code? A withholding tax code in India we used to call as TDS is used to define TDS rate, for example 1%, 5%, 10%. So TDS type is contractor, professional, rent, commission, etc. So the threshold limit is surcharges, cess rules, posting rules. Each withholding tax code represent a specific rate plus rule. Example in Indian TDS, 01 means professional fees 10%, 02 contracted with 1%, 03 rent with 10%, 04 commission with 5%. Like this you can use this examples in Indian TDS system. So how to configure this? So go to financial accounting global settings, withholding tax, extended withholding tax, calculation define withholding tax codes. Or you can use the T code directly OBWW. Required master data to set up this withholding tax code. So withholding tax type is required. For example, you can use the T code to create the tax type OBCG, like professional fees, contract fees or rent fees. So then withholding tax code you can create by using the OBWW T code. So here you can define percentage basic rate or surcharges or cess or minimum maximum base amount or thresholds. So the number 3, assign withholding tax in vendor master. So go to /NVP under the company code data tab. You can go to withholding tab, assign your withholding tax type and withholding tax code. So if exemption certificate is required, you can enter that one also. For example, posting examples, your invoice is value is 1 lakh rupees. So withholding tax code 01, TDS at a 10%. SAP automatically calculates. So 10,000 is TDS amount, post the remaining amount 90,000 to vendor. The next field is withholding tax country / region key. The withholding tax country / region key identifies which country's tax rules should be applied for withholding tax. We used to call as TDS, withholding tax, retention tax, etc. So based on the country, the name will change and the procedure will change. SAP needs This because each country has different tax laws, rates, thresholds, certificates, and reporting formats. So why it is needed? Because TDS rules are different for India, US, UK, UAE, etc. SAP must apply the correct tax type, tax code, and calculation procedures. Reports and forms like India TDS files, 1099 forms, etc. depends on the country requirement. So these are all the examples of withholding tax country keys. For India, TDS tax deducted at source, and US 1099 withholding rules. For United Kingdom, PAYE CAS withholding. For Germany, German withholding tax regulations. For UAE, usually no WHT withholding tax in UAE. Singapore withholding tax for services and interest. In India, always use for TDS setup. So where to maintain this CDS setup? So where to maintain this configurations? So go to /NSPRO, SAP reference IMG, financial accounting global settings, withholding tax, extended withholding tax, basic settings, define country for withholding tax. No manual entry is usually needed in the vendor master. And the next field is recipient type. So what does mean by recipient type? Recipient type identifies what kind of vendors you are paying specifically for withholding tax TDS purposes. Different recipient types may have different TDS rates, exemptions, or rules depending on the country's tax laws. This field helps SAP apply the correct withholding tax calculations. So why is recipient types important? Because the TDS rules often depend on who the payment is made to. For example, individual, company or firm, HUF, trust, preparator, partnership, government body, foreign vendor. There are different types. So SAP uses the recipient type to determine whether withholding tax is applicable, which TDS code should apply, whether the reduced or zero rate applies, threshold limits and exemption rules. All this informations need to be coming under recipient type. So examples in Indian TDS rate changed based on the recipient category. Examples of the recipient types in India. So the recipient code is 1 individual or proprietorship, 2 company private limited or limited, 3 partnership firm, 4 HUF, 5 trust or society, 6 government, 7 foreign company. So like this you can create different code for recipient type. So the next field is exception number. So we need to understand what is meant by exception number. Exception number is the certificate or reference number issued by the tax authority that allows a vendor to receive reduced TDS or no TDS on payments. This is used mainly in extended withholding tax, especially TDS in India. SAP stores the exemption reference here so it can apply reduced tax rates, apply zero tax if fully exempt, apply zero tax if fully exemption, track validity of the exemption. So when is an exemption number is used? Vendor submit TDS exemption certificates like lower deduction certificate under section 197, no deduction certificate, exemption under special government notifications, PAN based temporary exemption. So PAN is nothing but permanent account number. SAP needs the certificate number as a proof. So example in India TDS, the income tax departments may issue section 197 certificate, vendor gets reduced TDS rate. Example, professional fee instead of 10%, vendor gets 2% as a TDS. So SAP needs the exemption number, which is nothing but certificate number. The second option is from 10% to 0%, which means exemption. Vendor is exemption for a specific period. SAP requires exemption number, validity from and to date, and reduced rate information also. So why SAP needs it? For audit trail, for TDS reports, for validating reduced zero rate to avoid manual errors. Valid until is the expiry date of a vendor's TDS or withholding tax exemption or reduced rate certificate. It tells SAP how long the exemption or reduced rate is applied. So, purpose of valid until, SAP uses this date to number 1, stop applying exemption after expiry. Number 2, automatically return to normal TDS rate once expired. Number 3, ensure TDS calculation follow legal validity. Number 4, prevent wrong or excess exemptions. The important information: if you leave valid until blank, SAP assumes no exemption applies. So it's very important. So the next field is exemption authority. So what is authority? Exemption authority is a government department or legal authority that is issued the vendor's withholding tax exemption or lower certification. So SAP stores this so that you know who issued the exemption. Auditors can verify the certificate. Reportings remains legally compliant. So why SAP needs exemption authority? Because withholding tax exemption must be supported by proper certification issuer, government authority, complaints for audits and legal checks. When generating TDS report, SAP may print this field for statutory use. So the next field is previous account number. Previous account number is used to store the vendor's old account number if the vendor master was migrated from a legacy system like from Tally or Oracle or from the old SAP version. A different company code and old account structure used before rememoering and manual vendor ledger which is coming under pre-ERP systems. It is not used for postings, it is only reference informations. Okay, you can use the existing old account number as a reference informations when you are migrating the system from SAP old version to latest version. Let's say R3 system to S4 HANA or ECC to S4 HANA, or from other ERP system like a Tally or Oracle to SAP system. Or you can transfer the manual ledger to in SAP software. So why is it used? This field helps finance teams may old vendor numbers to new SAP vendor numbers. During audits, if old bills or vouchers still show the old account number, for smooth transaction from old ERP to SAP to avoid confusions after renumbering. Important notes: this fields does not affect accounting postings. It is only for reference, audit and migration purpose. You can leave it as blank if not used. So what is personal number? Personal number is the employee ID from SAP HR, which is coming under HCM, Human Capital Management, that links a vendor to an internal employee. This field is used only if the vendor is also an employee, such as employee who receive travel reimbursement, employees receiving petty cash payments, employee who act as a freelancer consultants but still have an HR number, employee who need vendor type payments outside payroll. SAP stores the HR personal number under the PE or NR technical field in our SAP system. So why personal number is used? If links FI finance with HR human resources for employee travel expense reimbursement. When an employee submit expenses, SAP post FI documents to a vendor linked with their personal number. Second one is cross application reporting, HR plus FI combined reports. Third one is avoid duplicate master data. The system knows the vendor is actually an internal employee. And payroll related postings if configured. So where it comes from? From SAP HR module like HCM2, the T code PA20, PA30, PA40. So for example, employee name is Suresh, the personal number is 1005. In vendor master, the personal number is 1005. You have to enter the same number. The next field is main economic activity. Main economic activity represents the primary business or economic activity of the vendor. It is typically a classification code that tells SAP what type of business the vendor is involved in manufacturing or services or construction or transport or trading, etc. Okay, this field helps in reporting compliance, statistical analysis, or government or tax related classifications if required. So why it is used? Companies use this field for the number one is legal or statistical reporting. Some countries require reporting vendor activities for tax authorities, government statistics, industry classifications. Number two, vendor segmentation, useful for spend analysis, KPI reports, category wise purchasing decisions, risk assessment. Number three, complaints and audit. Some industries have specific complaints rules. So the next field is a distribution type for employment tax. The distribution type for employment tax is used when the vendor is actually an employee and you are processing employment related tax payments through the SAP FI instead of payroll. This field tells SAP how to distribute or classify taxes that related to employee payments, such as the number one, travel reimbursement with taxable components. Number two, allowances paid via financial accounting. Number three, contract or part-time payments made to employees. Number four, any employee payments that require statutory tax reporting. This field is only used when FI and HR payroll are integrated. So when this field is used, you will use this field when the number one, vendor equal to employee linked via personal number. So here vendor means it is an employee. Employee is the vendor. So, and number two, taxable payments to an employee go through FI, not payroll. Number three, country specific labor/tax rules require proper classification of the tax. If your vendor is a normal business vendor, this field is not required. Keep it as a blank. If the vendor is a employee, your internal employee, then you need to use this field. So the next one is activity code for gross income tax. So which is nothing but it is a country specific classification that tells SAP what type of activity or service the vendor performs for the purpose of gross income tax or professional tax reporting. This field helps SAP determine whether the vendor's payment is subjected to gross income tax or which activity code or rate should be used. Number three, how to classify the vendor in statutory declarations. This field is mainly used in Latin America countries, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil. In many other countries, including India, this field is not used at all. So why is it used? For countries that use a gross income tax, the government needs the activity code to classify number one, what service the vendor performs. Number two, what industry they belong to. Number three, which gross income rate applies. Number four, whether exemptions exist. Number five, SAP use this code to determine the correct withholding or reporting during FI postings. For example, the country specific, let's say Argentina. So common activity code include 010 professional service, 20 construction service, 30 wholesale trade, 40 retail trade, 50 transport service, 60 manufacturing. Like this, they are going to use different examples. These code affect the gross income withholding. For example, in Mexico or Brazil, industry classifications, gross income tax reporting, regional tax distribution. In India, it is not used. So just keep it as a blank when you are creating vendor for Indian companies. All this field coming under vendor account management in company code data. Next we can go for vendor payment transactions. Under the vendor payment transactions, you can see the detailed each and every field requirements.